I studied memory with Harry Lorraine, but most of it I've forgotten about, so I'll be with you in just a second. Jerry Lucas also was in my class. I'm Roger Kaufman with Speaking of Music, and I wanted to welcome all of you tonight to the Westport Public Library. We are delighted to be here tonight to share with you a most unusual show about the roots of ragtime and the influence of ragtime on swing music after jazz. And we have the benefit tonight of having a cast of authentic ragtime musicians that will startle you with their authenticity and commitment to the type of music. I want to thank a few people before I begin the musical part of the evening, if I can, and pay particular thanks to the Westport Library in general for being here and the purpose for which it's intended and the way it's being run and the people behind it. I can't think of a better way to try to survive the chaotic and unfortunate circumstances of the way the world is today than to go to the Westport Public Library and chill out and do something wonderful, uplifting, and be with other people, like-minded people, and have some truth and substance and all good things that no library has ever been so successful at doing all in one place. I think we should give a big round of applause for the Westport Library team and Mr. Bill Harmer, who's our bartender tonight. That gives you an idea of how down home he is. And all of the tech staff and people that are interested in putting on incredible programming here 7 days a week, 365. It is just a whirlwind of good things going on here, as most of you know already. But I just wanted to speak to the pleasure that it is to be here. I also wanted to thank just a few people who are responsible for giving me an opportunity to talk about ragtime. And I'll be quick as I can. One is the former curator from the Smithsonian, Mr. John Hasse. Another is the band leader, Andrew Green, who is running the Peacherine Ragtime Orchestra, who is so marvelous. And other ragtime performers such as Terry Waldo and Brian Wright, Frederick Hodges, Vince Giordano and his orchestra. And mostly I want to thank my grandfather, Mel Kaufman, for his ragtime music and enriching my life and my family's life and the lives of many others since 1918. We'll hear a couple of songs of his later in the evening. And so I think the overall program of Speaking of Music is a concept that came about a few years ago once the COVID situation had set in on top of the political situation and the discord and the difficulty people were having in talking to each other, and how the town hall concept became more important, and having gatherings where you sit and talk and discuss, with like-minded people. So I began doing moderated speaking panels locally here to litmus test the idea for a combination of live music with some discussion. So that's what you're sitting in tonight. This is the third in a series of Speaking of Music evenings. We really appreciate you being here, and we hope you have a great time and enjoy yourselves. I wanted to talk a little about the evening tonight to give you some point of view of where we're coming from in terms of the importance of ragtime music in the evolution of all American music over time. The journey tonight is into the history of ragtime, involves going back to the very beginning, in fact, and that's not actually Scott Joplin, it is Africa, and it's Europe, and it's the music that was created over there, that came here, was incubated here, and grew into Delta blues or spiritual or ring shouts or field hollers, and ended up in New Orleans and came up the New Orleans rivers up to Kansas City and Chicago and became jazzed up and became swing music, and then turned into bebop and boogie woogie, and then you had cool jazz, and then you had rock and roll, and it all evolved in the evolution of American music. So that's what the Speaking of Music core topic pool is drawn from, is American indigenous music, not necessarily born here, but raised here. And it all evolves, interestingly, through the cultural and historical events of the time. It is this marvelous meeting of history and changes and demands and culture and things that happened that created the American music. And the technology that was involved is, putting the light bulb aside, there was no recorded music at the time of Ragtime. You had to go out live to hear it. So the connections of the past to the present are undeniable, because there are three primary elements of African music, of the drums, dance, and song in African music. Drums provide the rhythm for dancers, while voices sing in call and response style. Dance music has always been drum-driven, from ballroom dancing to hip-hop. And if you go back as far as you can go into African villages, you see and sense and understand the importance of the beat and the song and the dance. It's the trio. Nothing happens till there's a beat. The beat creates the vibe and the groove and the movement forward. Then there's the song, and hopefully a dance. Now, what was happening in Europe at the time in the 1500s, 1600s was different than what was Africa. In Africa, music established community by bringing people together to celebrate life. Someone beats on a drum, a village dances, and everyone sings songs that proclaim their identity and heritage. Going forward 150 years, a rock concert does something similar. It gives people connection to live experience that surpasses recordings. By contrast, in Europe, however, classical music was generally led by a conductor in the 16th to 18th century, and the music was usually notated and carefully written by melody, emphasized by melody and harmony, but it was written. Jazz is different. In African drum groups, there is no conductor. The drums and bell patterns lead, and other instruments fall into the groove. Rhythm is there for one purpose, and one purpose is to engage and inspire. Reality is, very few Americans are hardly aware of this historical impact on ragtime and jazz and swing or modern music. There's hardly any pop, blues, jazz, gospel, rap, or artist who hasn't been touched by these kinds of past musical influence. American music, after all, who knows more about freedom than the enslaved? So what am I driving at? It's very simple. The African-American experience is and was the basis for which spirituals, early roots blues, and the like, after field hollers, ring shouts, and call and response, created the beginnings of jazzing it up or ragging it, and eventually became known as ragtime, which was the beginning of jazz as we know it. New Orleans is a key understanding to America's deep musical culture, and particularly ragtime, as you will hear tonight, through demonstration by top ragtime artists in the United States, with incredible diversity and melting pot effect of New Orleans, from the cultures of the Caribbean, Africa, Europe, France, Canada, Ireland, and the Delta, all mixed into one in New Orleans. You throw in a little Louis Armstrong, showing his feelings, and not living in muted silence, and he was taking solos and going off charts and created what we now call jazz. Looking both backwards and forwards, ragtime was, in a sense, an overture to the 20th century to come. America's musical shot heard around the world. Its infectious syncopated rhythm and vibrant music had broken free from European traditions and dances, so that soon young people and dancers would be moving to ragtime. A new beat, in fact, white moved to music from black plantation dances that originated from the original minstrel shows. There we have it, folks. And now, to begin the musical portion of the evening, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Jeff Barnhart. Tell you quickly about Jeff Barnhart, who's going to be out here in a second. Jeff is a piano player from New London, Connecticut, and has been touring the world internationally as a pianist, vocalist, arranger, band leader, recording artist, ASCAP composer, educator, and entertainer. His mastery of the classic swing, jazz, and ragtime repertoire of the early to mid-20th century has found Jeff constantly appearing both as a soloist, band pianist, and with smaller groups, most notably with Ivory and Amp Gold, his wife, Anne, who's also a flautist, at parties, festivals, clubs, and cruises throughout the world. His knowledge of the history of America's early pop styles and best current practitioners, combined with his superior people skills, has awarded him as musical director for numerous acclaimed annual events. And he specializes in crafting all-star bands that allow his hand-picked musicians to play unprecedented heat, cohesion, and swing. Reviewer Jack Rummel recently summed up the reason for Jeff's popularity, offering, "When it comes to talent, speed, versatility, creativity, mastery of multiple genres, and just plain entertaining zaniness, Jeff Barnhart stands alone." Will you please welcome Mr. Jeff Barnhart to the stage?
Thank you, Roger. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for coming, and Roger, thank you for inviting me to be here and to open the show. So Roger was speaking volumes of history in a very short amount of time. The whole thing is that, yes, ragtime was an amalgamation of rhythmic genius from our enslaved Africans, who would then become African Americans, and European styles, forms, and harmonies. And the best thing to do is just mention the word syncopation, which to musicians means something, to non-musicians might not. Syncopation is notes that appear in places they shouldn't, in a sense. In weak beats, perhaps they appear early, late, they're held a little bit longer, surprises throughout. And of course, prior to ragtime, syncopation, you can find it in Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, but ragtime was all syncopation all the time. To illustrate that, let's try something together. I want you to, we're going to do a little audience participation. Stomp with your foot and alternating clapping with your hands. Now that's a steady march-like accompaniment. You keep it up. I'll clap some syncopation. All right, thank you very much. So you heard what I was doing was exactly what syncopation is. All right, those notes just were not part of that steady march-like rhythm. So how do we end up getting ragtime spread? After the Civil War, all of these talented people are now freed people. They're off and they're bringing instruments along with them, their voices, as Roger mentioned, and one of the coolest ones, of course, was the banjo. Ragtime, ladies and gentlemen, was originally a stringed style of music. The piano would come in later on. So there's a very early rag. It was the first rag written by a black composer. His name was Tom Turpin, and it came out in 1897. He himself did not write it down. He had it arranged by someone who could write the score out for him. The first part sounds as if it's a banjo melody. It's all single note on the piano. You'll hear the steady left hand. You'll hear a simple banjo melody. And then he goes from section to section where he'll play a theme and then rag that theme. So hopefully you'll be able to hear it. If we have that microphone on, Travis, I'll take you through it verbally as well. So this is Tom Turpin's Harlem Rag from 1897. Is this thing on? It is, thank you. Variation. New section. Variation. New section. Variation. Thank you so much. One of the things that Roger hasn't mentioned yet, but you'll hear throughout, is that ragtime in its earliest form was improvisatory. It's when Scott Joplin comes along with his training and his ability to write down his own scores and his wish that ragtime would become America's serious classical music, that we get the idea that now it is a through-composed style of music. But back then, all of your pianists who called themselves professors, perhaps ironically because most of them could not read a note of music. How do you get a ragtime professor to stop playing? Put music in front of him. That's how it was. So this particular piece that I'll play, just the first two sections to get our ears attuned to the Joplin ideal, the Maple Leaf Rag from 1899 was a turning point in American music. It was the first piece of instrumental music in the history of the world to sell 1 million copies. So for your kids and grandkids, that's going viral on YouTube or TikTok. So here is the Maple Leaf Rag, just the first two sections as Joplin wished it to be performed. Thank you. Okay. So the thing is that it was printed, it was published, you could buy it, you could play it. But your professional ragtime performers were not going to play it like that, because they were not playing in places where everybody was politely sitting there ready to clap after it was over. They were trying to show off. So up in St. Louis, there was a particular style of playing that might have had the Maple Leaf Rag sound like this. That's what they wanted. They wanted that sort of hoopla. Yeah, that was great. And Joplin was saying, no, that's not what we want. We want it to be beautiful. And then people would start coming up to St. Louis, which was the center of this ragtime piano stuff. During the panel, we can talk a bit about that. But one guy comes up from New Orleans, he says, you boys are playing this way too fast. Down in the Crescent City, we take it very easy. That man was Jelly Roll Morton. Totally different. Thank you. Totally different way of playing the Maple Leaf Rag. So good music is also open to a bunch of interpretation, something that makes it fun. Now we fast forward. Now all of these people I've mentioned, of course, Scott Joplin, Tom Turpin, who had this place in St. Louis, these are all African Americans. Your earliest example of ragtime was being played by the African American population. And then as they started to spread out beyond their confines, post-Civil War and beyond, they were showing up everywhere and sharing and stealing from each other, to the point where eventually 5 guys from New Orleans are discovered in Chicago where they're playing. They end up in New York, and they are the first ones to make a jazz record. It was released on April 1st, 1917, the very day Scott Joplin died. I'll let you think about the layers of irony there. But in the meantime, it's called the Tiger Rag. So this will be a pastiche of all sorts of different styles, because it started out as a quadrille, one of those old sort of staid minuet type dances. And then Jelly Roll and a bunch of those New Orleans pianists started doing something else with it. Mine is my own arrangement. Nobody else would want it. And this tempo, for those of you who are classically trained, this will be tempo disturb the neighbors. Thank you so much. Well, as Roger said, tonight is, we all have a short amount of time and so much that we want to share. So in order to finish up my segment, let's go back to Jelly Roll Morton, who was a real bridge between ragtime with his forms and the different march styles he was using, the different sections in his pieces, but with that great syncopation, the ragtime syncopation that was starting to move a bit forward into a jazz time, if you will. And to help illustrate that, I'd like to bring up some friends you'll see later on in the show as well. All the way from Chicago, ladies and gentlemen, the incredible Andy Shum. And he's leaving. But this guy's ready. All the way from New Jersey by way of New York and the world, Brian Nalepka on bass and bass. I got my horn here. That's it. Oh, you have it? All right, there we go. I caught Andy unawares. This is exactly what it is. It's all spontaneous. It's all improvised. And I mentioned to Andy, hey, go grab your clarinet, your cornet. And we're going to do a piece called The Wolverine Blues. But it wasn't a blues, and it actually wasn't entitled Wolverine Blues by Jelly Roll Morton. By now, he's out in California having the good life. Sun, surf, beautiful ladies, heat, great gigs. And in Chicago, a couple of shyster folks started publishing his music with different titles under their name. So he had to go back and defend his title. And so this one is actually called The Wolverines. And it goes a little bit like this. Jelly Roll Morton's Wolverines. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Brian. And, you know, he's come all the way from Chicago, so you'll have to hear more of him later. And Brian, too. Now, I do have to ask again, this is improvised entirely. Roger, will you come up to introduce the next person, or would you like me to? Okay, thank you. This fellow is sui generis. You will never find anyone who remotely approaches the musicality and love and knowledge of this gentleman you are about to experience and enjoy and be in awe of, as I was when I first met him, as a friend and as a musician. And I'm talking about the wonderful, I better make sure, Roger. Is it the fellow, I think? There he is. Perfect. Well, there's a young man over here who is also going to be part of this. I want to make sure somehow he didn't just elbow this guy or, you know. The incredible Jerome Paxton, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, buddy.
My pleasure.
Hey, since you're up here, you want to play a tune with me?
I would love to.
All right,
Well,
good.
thank you.
While he unpacks, I want to read you this little bio piece on this gentleman, if I may. Jerome Paxton plays black folk music from nearly all the idioms that entails. From the jazz of stride piano and banjo from New Orleans to New York, to the deepest of the blues played on guitar and harmonica, of which he has been a noted figure since his teenage years, from the rural music that reaches the beginnings of black arrival in America, played on fiddle, banjo, and bones. He deftly moves in ragtime and other turn-of-the-century music that gives the full breadth of black music before World War II in a package that doesn't lecture, but invites you to enjoy that music as it was given to him. Mr. Paxton has been known to give his audiences a sense of being transported not to a time, but a state of mind and understanding. That allows audiences to enjoy black folk music and have it become part of them, as has been the American experience from the beginning. Ironically, Mr. Paxton's grandmother was born in Louisiana in the same town called Melville that my grandfather was named after. My ancestral homeland was Germany, and my folks came in through New Orleans and settled up along the Mississippi in what became a small town called Melville. So when I met this dude in a bar in New York a couple of years ago, he was sitting in the back of the bar playing blues harp by himself, and I went over to him because I was listening, because I go looking for talent my whole life. And I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Oh, I'm from Louisiana." I said, "Oh, really? You're from Louisiana? Where in Louisiana are you from?" He said, "Melville." And that's my grandfather's ancestral homeland. Would you give a warm welcome to Mr. Jerome Paxton?
Thank you, Rob. Dang, that's a good introduction. I hope this isn't awful. Let's play the Ragtime Oriole.
Okay.
That'll be groovy. Here's some Ragtime on Liberace's nephew's banjo. Jeff Barnhart, ladies and gentlemen. We thank you so much. That was a little bit of ragtime by our second favorite Scott, Mr. James Scott. I think they used to call him the Chopin of ragtime, as you can hear. None of that stuff was easy, but it's meant to sound like it. Such is the goal with music. You're meant to sound like you lack sobriety, although what you do takes an awful lot of sobriety. Such is the ways with what we call elevated or developed music. I grew up playing what you call folk music. Folk music is the music that comes up out of the ground. It's what everybody has as a part of their individual culture. It doesn't matter where you're from, who you are. Everybody has a drum in their culture. Everybody has a fiddle in their culture. And we all make music with those instruments. And the purpose of that is not to elevate the notes, but elevate the ability to make those notes sing. Sometimes the notes are simple, but that's how it is with music that comes up out of the ground. It's your duty, once you get the music of your grandparents, to learn to make those simple 4 or 5 notes sing. And if you get a pretty good job, do a pretty good job of that, you might can annoy somebody in an orchestra. But the point is, you will have everything you need to make natural music and enjoy all the spiritual connectivity that goes along with music. I don't plan on talking you to death, but I try to play a little bit of both of those. That was a little bit more developed music, such as ragtime. Ragtime is the first black music that was allowed education. Ragtime is the culmination of all the black folk music that came before it, get mixed with counterpoint and advanced harmony and all these things that enriches your musical culture. But the music that it was, the music from which it sprang was just as good. It has a few different things in it. I'll play you some music from New Orleans now. New Orleans is a special place, not just for jazz, but for this instrument in particular. Guitars were very expensive in America. A guitar used to cost $58 in the 19th century. One of my heroes used to work for $16 a week. So that shows you how much a guitar cost back in the 19th century. Around 1900, they got to be $1.50. And now you understand why the guitar is America's favorite instrument, because of, not the strain on the back pockets. The state of Louisiana had that for a long time because of the Spanish. And I'll play you a little song that, has a little ragtime, a little jazz in it, from somewhere between 1895 and 1903. Doesn't have a name. It's just meant to tantalize your self. Yeah. Oh, have mercy. This is an older model banjo. As a matter of fact, it's so old that I'm gonna have to tune it like this and let it sit down and rest one more minute. I'll play you a little short demonstration of the music that was going around the world in, let's say, around the 1880s. There was a man named Horace Weston. Do y'all know Horace Weston? I think Horace Weston was, I think he was born probably about 50 miles from here. He was a Civil War veteran who got blown up and had his back broke and had all sorts of things wrong with him in the Civil War, and ended up being one of the greatest banjo players was ever known. Horace Weston died in 1890, and 40 years later, people were still talking about going to his concerts. He wrote a few good tunes, but the most famous of his was his Great Minor Jig. I'll just play you about the first section of it so you can get what's going on. This came out 1883. Sweet little chorus. That thing went everywhere. Every banjo player you know came up with an imitation or something based off of that song. One of my favorites is the fella from England named Mr. Joe Morley, who Lord knows how many times a person from England saw somebody who was black that wasn't from Africa, but actually came from the land of the five-string banjo and all those good American things that he was imitating. Joe Morley had a keen ear. He could imitate anybody's culture on the five-string banjo, which is an enigma wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in a waistcoat. Joe Morley did some great imitations of black music, and I'll play you two of his most famous ones so you can get what people's idea of black music sounded like back then, at least on the banjo. As you can see, these are two different instruments. This is how banjos tend to be nowadays. And this is the 1840s model. Now, we don't have much authentic black music that survives in its written form from the pre-war years or the antebellum years. And but there's no doubt it was out there. I'm just reading a book now that talks about all the music over the Americas, including down in Jamaica. And they said there was these big religious dances, and there usually was always a banjo at one of them. And the banjo helped unify all the different African cultures that was brought to the Americas. I won't waste too much time talking about stuff we can only guess about, but I guess the best thing to do is play you one of the oldest real folk songs I know. When I was reading this book, I understand how they were talking about these things being religious in nature and how they were talking about them being dangerous in nature. This is a little, what my grandmother would call a conjure song. I don't know if y'all know what conjure is, but conjure is root work, black magic, all that sort of stuff. And you know, the old religions weren't allowed, but they made the mistake of leaving the music out there. So you could put a root on somebody with the music. And just like all that old stuff, it takes a little bit from the Bible and then mixes a little with secular, and we get there. This song's called Brand New Shoes. That takes from this old idea that, well, you got to change your ways if you want to get to heaven. And they describe that as getting some brand new shoes. And I love this verse. It's the whole song is the act of putting the hex on somebody, if you could extrapolate to that. You meditate on this verse over and over, and then you meditate on how the person you sings about just bungled the whole thing up. It's not pretty. It's not happy, but it helps you survive. Ain't no use. You can't get there without brand new shoes. No boy. No, it's gonna set your soul afire. When you hit that yellow guy black eye. You know you wanna go to heaven, ain't no use. You can't get there without brand new shoes. No boy. All right, friends, thank you so much. I'm gonna play this last little bit on the on the best thing Germany ever gave us. Y'all know the correct German way to play a harmonica? Yeah. Don't worry, I won't be doing that all night. I'll play you a little music from, this song is, this is one they used to sing around Melville. I'll play you a song from up this way that is so deep in Southern culture, in black culture, that people forget that it was written by a white man from Boston. And not that old. It sounds like a song from the 1870s. It was written in 1907 or something like that. I'll play the chicken reel, and I'll see if I can render the ice water blues. That should send you home nicely. One second.
Jerome Paxson. Let's hear it for Jerome. Melville, Louisiana's finest. By way of Brooklyn, New York. Out of sight. Super bad. Thank you. God bless. That's a wow. About 3 months ago, I was in Orbisonia, Pennsylvania for a ragtime festival, as is my hobby and part-time pastime. And I stumbled upon a interesting, what I would call prodigy, young ragtime performer that I would like to share tonight and have come to the stage from Champlain, New York. Would you please welcome Mr. Peter Barsh. Peter Barsh.
Roger told me at the Central Pennsylvania Ragtime Festival, and because you asked me to come here to play ragtime, I'm going to play for you Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag, because it's the obvious ragtime to start with. Jeff Barnhart didn't play the whole thing, and he told me, because he didn't play the whole thing, I could play the whole thing, so I appreciate that, Jeff, thank you. I, of course, am not going to play it anywhere near as written by Scott Joplin. Scott would actually probably roll over, and it's great if you've heard me playing this, but I'm going to play it in G, not A flat, that's one slip up, but also I'm going to probably play it more like a Harlem stride pianist, if anything, so this is going to get very interesting. So here we go. I'm going to try to give my best shot at Maple Leaf Rag by Scott Joplin. to apologize for any mistakes that I made, because I usually play that one and I actually used to play that one in C, which I did this time, and recently I switched over to playing in G, which is closer to the original key. And then I played it in C again after not playing it in C for months, so that's where the little minor harmonic slip up came up. If you're not a musician, you probably didn't notice. I hope you didn't. Thank God. All right. Well, the one thing about ragtime is it evolved over years, and one thing that Joplin introduced was, of course, the very common 3/4 octave pattern, which he introduced that kind of pattern. However, in 1906, Charles L. Johnson, another prolific ragtime composer, wrote a tune called Dill Pickle's Rag, and it's one of the most overplayed ragtime pieces, arguably. It's just unfortunate because a lot of people just don't play it that well. However, if you go see the professional performers at the West Coast Ragtime Festival, they play it absolutely fantastically. So I'm going to play an arrangement similar to that one used by Frederick Hodges, who I'm never going to match his playing because he's absolute piano god. But I'm going to do my best. And one thing that Johnson introduced, and this was copied by George Botsford later on in Black and White Rag, is the 3/4, just the 3/4 single note pattern, which is just constant 3/4 pattern. So I'm going to play that one. Frederick likes to use a sostenuto pedal. It's a difficult pedal to use, but it's fun for adding counter melody, so I'm going to give that my best shot. So here we go. Dill Pickle's Rag by Charles L. Johnson, 1906. Key of G, if anybody's wondering, but I played in C. Try to remember the intro. There we go. I made it. I somehow made it through that one. It's a tricky piece, deceptively tricky, because with all the walk-ups, like it's hard to do that accurately, especially for me. But and if you see pianists who what am I saying, specialize in classical jazz, especially Frederick Hodges and others with extremely stiff technique, those guys are just hammering the octaves like a machine gun. So I hope I can work up to that level because it's really a sight to see. In any case, the next piece I'm going to play, actually, I didn't put this on my set list, but I figured I might as well play it. It's I guess the successor to Dill Pickle's Rag in a way, Black and White Rag, and it follows the same sort of pattern with the 3/4. Except at this time it's so some of you might recognize that, probably using internet memes and other such things that don't go set around here. So I'm going to play Black and White Rag, and this time I'm going to try not to tarnish it like all little kids do on the internet these days. Black and White Rag by George Bonsford. What's interesting is that tune was written in 1908, but yeah, it copied the Dill Pickles Rag 3/4 pattern.
Peter Bosch. Peter Bosch. Let's hear it for Peter. And let us recognize the groundswell with the young piano players and musicians in Ragtime. This gentleman is extraordinary, and he's part of a whole cadre of young, new people performing ragtime music. Peter Bosch, thank you so much. Outstanding, thank you. We're going to take a short pause to reset for our speaker panel. We have an illustrious crew of panelists tonight, including Mr. Ed Berlin, who's here, who wrote the book on Scott Joplin. So stick around. We'll be about 5 minutes to reset, and we'll be right back with speaking and questions and so forth.